The scientific revolution. We picture pristine laboratories, thoughtful gentlemen in wigs staring into telescopes, and the sudden, glorious arrival of reason. It's a nice story. The reality was substantially weirder, messier, and frankly, more gullible. This wasn't a clean break from superstition. It was more like superstition put on a lab coat and started taking notes. For every Isaac Newton discovering universal gravitation, there was someone else confidently asserting that mice spontaneously generated from sweaty underwear and a pile of wheat. The pioneers of modern thought were also, quite often, the world's most magnificently stubborn weirdos, proving that the road to knowledge is paved with some truly spectacular faceplants. Let's begin with Dr. Johann Beringer, Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Würzburg in the 1720s. A man of God, a man of science, and a man with a dangerous passion for fossils. He had a theory. These figured stones, as they were called, weren't the remains of ancient life. Of course not. They were either bizarre, failed experiments by God or a mysterious, formative virtue in the earth itself, just making art. He was so committed to this idea that he would pay local boys to bring him any interesting rocks they found, a fact two of his academic colleagues found absolutely hilarious. Those colleagues, J. Ignaz Roderick and George von Eckhart, decided to help Beringer find some proof. They began carving wonderfully absurd fossils out of limestone and planting them for his diggers to discover. At first, they were plausible, but as Beringer ate it all up, they escalated. Soon, he was finding stones depicting spiders in their webs, birds with beaks, and my personal favorite, a pair of frogs mid-coitus. They even carved comets, the sun, and the moon. The piece de resistance? Stones bearing the name of God in perfect Hebrew, Latin, and Arabic script. Beringer was ecstatic. Divine proof. He was so sure of his God rocks that he poured his life savings into publishing a lavishly illustrated book in 1726, the Lithography Würzburgensis. It was his masterpiece. This is the point where his colleagues realized the joke had gone a bit too far and might, reflect badly on the entire university. They confessed. Beringer refused to believe them, assuming they were just jealous of his incredible finds. He only accepted the truth when his diggers found the ultimate fossil, one with his own name carved on it. He spent the rest of his life and fortune trying to buy back all the copies of his book, cementing his legacy not as a great theorist, but as the owner of the world's most embarrassing rock collection. Now, let's talk about medicine, a field that has always been ripe for terrible ideas. Meet Robert Fludd, a 17th century English physician and mystic. He was a proponent of something called the weapon salve. The idea was simple in a completely unhinged way. If someone was stabbed, you don't treat the wound. That's just messy. Instead, you clean the weapon, the sword, the dagger, and apply a special ointment to it. The wound would then magically heal on its own, thanks to a sympathetic connection between the blade and the flesh it rent. Because physics apparently was just a suggestion. The best part is, it worked. Or rather, it seemed to. People who had the weapon salve treatment had a much higher survival rate than those who received conventional care. This wasn't because of cosmic rays or magical vibrations, of course. It was because conventional care in the 17th century involved doctors sticking their unwashed hands, dirty rags, and questionable potions directly into an open wound. The weapon salve's greatest medical contribution was that it got doctors to leave the patient alone. The body, free from being actively poisoned and infected by its physician, could just do its thing and heal. A triumph of placebo, pragmatism, and the profound benefits of doing absolutely nothing. No tour of scientific weirdness is complete without Athanasius Kircher, a 17th-century German Jesuit scholar who was less a person and more a human search engine with a flair for the dramatic. He wrote about everything: magnetism, geology, music, optics, Egyptology, plagues. He built one of the first public museums in Rome, a cabinet of curiosities that included a vomiting statue and a supposed mermaid skeleton. He was a genius, a polymath, and a man who was almost never troubled by the possibility that he might be wrong. If you needed a grand, all-encompassing theory about literally anything, Kircher was your man. Accuracy was not guaranteed. Kircher's most famous blunder was his decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphs. While others were starting to suspect they might be, an alphabet, Kircher was convinced they were complex divine symbols, each one containing profound mystical wisdom. He got his hands on an obelisk and set to work. The actual hieroglyphic text simply read Autocrator, a title for the Roman Emperor Domitian. Kircher's translation? It took up pages. It began, "The protection of Osiris against the violence of Typho must be elicited according to the proper rites and ceremonies." He basically wrote an entire fantasy novel based on a single word. It was magnificent, impressive, and 100% unequivocally wrong. Kircher represents the spirit of his age perfectly. This was a time when the lines between science, magic, and religion were practically non-existent. He correctly deduced that the plague was spread by minute living creatures decades before microbes were confirmed, a stunningly prescient insight. Then he'd turn around and publish a detailed schematic of Noah's Ark, complete with calculations on waste management for the unicorns. He was a walking embodiment of the transition from a world explained by divine mystery to one explained by natural laws. He just happened to think both were happening at the same time, inside a volcano. Let's fast forward to 1835, when science had supposedly gotten its act together. A New York newspaper, The Sun, began publishing a series of articles about the breathtaking discoveries of famed astronomer Sir John Herschel. Using a revolutionary new telescope, Herschel had apparently managed to get a clear view of the surface of the moon. And it was inhabited. The articles, supposedly reprinted from the Edinburgh Journal of Science, described the lunar landscape in exquisite detail. There were vast forests, oceans, and herds of, bison, lunar bison, which was just the start. The reports grew more sensational each day. Herschel had discovered blue, goat-like unicorns. He'd found bipedal, tailless beavers who lived in huts and carried their young in their arms. These beavers could even make fire. Then came the grand finale, the discovery of winged humanoids, the Vespertilio Homo, or Batmen, who spent their days in serene contemplation around a mysterious golden temple. The public was utterly captivated. The paper's circulation exploded. When the whole thing was revealed as a hoax, nobody even seemed to mind. They'd been entertained. It turns out people love a good story more than good data, a lesson we seem to have to relearn every single generation. These stories aren't just amusing blunders. They show us that the scientific method wasn't born fully formed. It had to be learned, often the hard way. The process of discovery is inseparable from the process of being fooled, of fooling yourself, and of clinging to beautiful ideas long after the evidence has packed its bags and left. For every fraud, there are a dozen honest mistakes. For every prankster, there's a true believer like Beringer, whose only crime was wanting the world to be more magical than it is. It's a very human impulse, and a reminder that even in the age of reason, our capacity for wonder is matched only by our capacity to get things completely spectacularly wrong. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!